professional speaker manual, as our Toastmaster Day just said. It's called Professional, I don't know the title. You have a title, it's Christmas in Cambodia 1974, which I don't really know what it's about, but I would assume it has something to do with his experience that he's had for many, many years traveling throughout Asia and in America. I know that he's from America, and it's a pleasure for me to tell you his objectives today. The objectives, number one, is to tell a story that will be of interest to the audience. As we know, we've already got an interest in that. Second, number two is a addiction to entertainment. Oh, in addition, sorry, not addiction.
Right.
In addition to entertaining the audience, the speech should have a message. I'm sure I can see from the title it does. And the third one is to use all his skills that he has developed in the previous projects. He has been a past division governor in America. District governor. Two district governors. Two different districts. So he's quite accomplished, so I want to introduce him now. Let's give a big hand to Paul Watson.
Magic is not needed to transform the world, because we all have that power within us. Each and every person has the power to transform the world. Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and most welcome guests, I'm going to take you on a journey back in time and space. In time, we're going to go back to December 1974, the middle of December, just a week or maybe 10 days before Christmas, 1974. I'm also going to take you back in time and space. In space, we're going to go to a war-torn country, Cambodia. I worked in Cambodia in 1974. The communists, the Khmer Rouge, occupied almost all of the country, except for a few cities. Phnom Penh was totally surrounded. The Khmer Rouge had blown up all the bridges, cut off all of the roads into Phnom Penh. The river, the artery for supplies, had been cut by the Khmer Rouge. And so Phnom Penh was a city in siege. No food, no fuel, nothing was coming into Phnom Penh. Phnom Penh was a city that was built for maybe 200,000 people. But because of the war, almost 2 million people were living in Phnom Penh, refugees. And my job was a refugee officer in the US Embassy. My job was to provide plastic sheeting so that people could build a shelter, to provide health care, food through soup kitchens, and to try to meet their basic human needs. It was one of those jobs that was 18 hours a day, every day, including Saturday and Sunday. It was a really difficult job because of the situation in Phnom Penh. But I love that job. I really love helping people meet their basic human needs. The Khmer Rouge were firing rockets into Phnom Penh, sometimes as many as 100 a day. At first they used the cover of night, but soon, towards the end of the war, they were firing rockets. They were raining down in the middle of the day. And there was something special about these rockets, these Katyusha rockets. They had no guidance system, so you would fire them, and they would land wherever they landed. There was no control. So if you were there in the city, you would hear the whine, the whistle of the rocket. If you were really lucky, then you heard an explosion. We called that the sound of those rockets were like chants. And you really didn't want someone else to suffer, but you also didn't want to die. So when you heard an explosion, there was a feeling of relief. If you didn't hear an explosion, there were only two possibilities. One was that the rocket was a dud and it didn't explode. And the other was that it fell on you, and you would not have a chance to tell that story afterwards. So I'm telling you all of this as background. Now, I got a call from the ambassador, Ambassador John Gunther Dean, a German American. I went to his office, and he said, Paul, I have heard that you're a magician. And I said, yes. He said, well, do some magic for me. I want to see some magic. Now, I always carried magic with me because there were always kids that I could entertain. So I reached in my pocket and I pulled out a ball and I said, Ambassador Dean, this is a small, red, round ball, right? And he said, yes. He said, what if I told you that this was a black ball? Would you believe me? And he said, no, it's a red, round ball. I said, what if I told you it was a big square? Would you believe me? He said, no. So I said, then watch. Nothing here, and nothing here. That's what it takes to work in Cambodia in 1974. He said, keep your eye on the small red round ball and tell me where it is. Whoops. I didn't say I was a good magician, I was just a magician. But I said, if you think the small red round ball is over here, no, that's the big square that I was talking about. And if you think the small red round ball is over here, no, that's the black ball that I was talking about. Wow. The small red round ball is back in my pocket where it started. So the ambassador saw all that and he said, you're a good magician. Now, I will tell you why I wanted to know. The nuns at the orphanage have asked the embassy to give a Christmas show, and you are the Christmas show. Now, when an ambassador says that you do something, you do it. So I agreed, but I had some conditions, 3 conditions. First of all, he had to let my wife and mother come from Bangkok to Phnom Penh, because dependents, wives and other children, could not stay in Phnom Penh. It was too dangerous. So my wife was living in Bangkok. He agreed to let her come, and my mother. I said, you have to allow me to bring my magic equipment from Bangkok. He agreed to bring that over. And the third thing I said, you have to allow or help me get the Cambodian national dancers to help me with the show. He agreed to that. So on the appointed day, the 24th of December, my wife and my mother arrived at the Phnom Penh airport. All of my magic equipment arrived. It was in the evening. So we went to bed that night, and it was quiet. There were only 4 or 5 rockets instead of 100. The next morning, I wanted to take my wife out to see the refugee camp that I worked in, just 7 kilometers outside of Phnom Penh. We got in the Jeep, we drove out there, and as we were driving along the road, I didn't see all of the coconut sellers and fruit sellers that you normally see along the road. So when we got to the little path that went back to the refugee camp, I told my mother and wife to stay in the Jeep. I walked back the 200 yards to the camp. When I got to the camp, I saw a horrific sight. I saw a small girl's head, maybe 5 or 6 years old, severed and put on a stake and put in front of the village. First, I dropped to my knees. I threw up. I felt so terrible. And then I realized that my wife and mother were out in the car. So I managed to get myself up. I ran back to the Jeep, got in the Jeep and turned around and drove back to the city. And the whole time I was thinking, thank God I didn't take my wife and mother back to that village. And I was also thinking, Christmas, 1974. This is going to be a day that I will always remember. I will never forget. Now, I found out later that the Khmer Rouge came into that refugee camp the night before. There had been a firefight. The government troops were shooting, the Khmer Rouge were shooting. It was loud. All of the villagers, all the refugees escaped, except the one girl. She was deaf. She didn't hear the firefight. The family ran away and forgot her, and the Khmer Rouge cut her head off to give those refugees a message. We rule here. The government can't help you. So back to the orphanage. We got to the orphanage, set up our magic. There was a big stage, and then there were no seats, just the floor. Set up our magic, and about an hour before the show, the Cambodian national dancers arrived. They were Ramayana dancers, and these 10 kids were the monkeys. We practiced a couple of times. They were great. The hour arrived. 200 kids come into the auditorium, along with the adults. And there we were on the stage. The curtains open, and there's a beautiful Hindu temple in the middle of the stage. My wife comes out, Chimriap Sua, says hello to everyone, and she opens the doors of the temple. You can't see anything in the temple except 10 swords that go in at every angle. The Cambodian dancers come out, the monkeys, and they're going all around the temple and looking at it and examining it. And then each dancer takes a sword, and there's nothing but an empty temple. My wife makes a magical gesture. There's a flash of fire, a puff of smoke, and there I am sitting in the temple, and I step out in a regal red jacket, a turban, and I start doing my magic. Chimriap Sialot, you know, Ishmar, the magician. I did just a little bit of magic, and I could see on the side my wife was motioning about my face. I thought, what's she talking about? And I realized that somehow, while I was in the temple, I had gotten some soot on my face. My face had these black marks on it. So she came out, and she was cleaning that off, and of course I was really embarrassed. And I was thinking, this has to be the worst day ever. I will never forget Christmas Day, 1974. It was time in my act to ask for a volunteer, so I asked for a volunteer from the audience, and all of the kids were putting up their hands. But I had already decided on who I wanted, so I went out and I took one boy from the audience, and as I brought him up, I heard this sigh, this gasp from the audience, like when something is wrong. I didn't know what it was, but I got the kid up, and I said, my name is Ishmar. What is your name? He didn't say anything. I repeated it. He didn't say anything. I didn't know what to do. So I started my regular line. I asked him, are you married? Do you have a wife out in the audience? He's just a little kid. He just looked at me. Usually I start getting big laughs. And I could see the audience struggling with me, trying to help this kid say something. He wouldn't say anything at all. So finally I just started the magic. I gave him a magic wand, and I showed him a box. And I showed him how to wave the wand. He waved the wand, and a rabbit appeared in the box. The kid looked at the rabbit. He still hadn't smiled. He still wasn't showing any response. I gave him the wand again, and I said, wave it again. He waved it again, and the rabbit disappeared. And for the first time, I saw on his face concern. He really liked that rabbit. But there was another box on the other side of the stage. So again, he took the wand, he waved it, and the rabbit appeared. And when the rabbit appeared, he ran over to the rabbit, and he said, Rabbit, Tonsai, my name is Lok Sok. My name is Sok. The audience burst out in applause. More applause than I had ever heard at any time in my life. And I was wondering, why was that? So I took him down to the audience. I finished the magic show, and I was talking to the nuns about why there was so much applause for this young kid that I now knew was named Sok. When he was just really small, the Khmer Rouge came into his village. His mother was a school teacher. His father was a local official. The Khmer Rouge lined up every person that had anything to do with the government and shot each of them in the back of the head. This kid had seen his father and mother die. And since that day, which was like 5 years before, he had never said a word. He lived in a world of silence. But when he met Mr. Peter, my rabbit, for the first time, he smiled. In all of those 5 years in the orphanage, he had never smiled. He had never said a word. But on that stage, on that day, on December the 25th, 1974, he smiled when he saw the rabbit. And he actually started talking to the rabbit. That's why there was so much applause. Everyone in the audience thought that they had seen a miracle. Now, there's a very simple message to my speech, and that is this. You don't need magic to transform the world. We all have the ability to transform the world, one person at a time. And the way that we do that is through our words and our deeds. So as Toastmasters, remember, whoever you talk to, wherever you talk to them, whatever you say, whatever you act in your deeds, you're impacting someone's life. You might never know how you're doing it, but you can have an impact, a positive impact on people's lives, simply through your words and your deeds. So for me, that day that I thought I would never forget, it's true, I'll never forget it. But now when I think of it, I don't think of the severed head. I don't think of the rockets. I think of Lok Sok, this young Cambodian kid who found his voice, who found his smile, and who maybe found his life by meeting my friend Peter the Rabbit. Mr. Toastmaster.